Hi, welcome. Today I'm here to talk to you about the subject when fear stops flow. Please leave your comments. Feel free to ask anything and I'll pick it up when I come to a stop. So, when fear stops flow, what do we mean by fear? What do we mean by flow? And why does any of that matter anyway? So, you could be an executive. You could be responsible for other people in your organization. You may be an entrepreneur, or you may be none of those things. And this is relevant to you. It is relevant to us all. Because whether we realize it or not, at some points, probably in our day, let alone our lives, we hit a situation where fear stops flow. And fear can come in many, many different guises. And you may be listening to this thinking, I don't feel fear. That's not a thing for me. So let's dive into, first of all, what I mean by fear, and then we'll talk about flow, and then we'll talk about what it means to you, what it means to your life, your organizations, your work, all of that. So fear does not necessarily mean blind panic. Fear manifests in certain behaviors, it manifests in certain responses. It can give us or leave us with a low level of feeling that things just aren't quite right. A general lack of okayness. We are dealing with currently in the world, in our organizations, and in our lives, fear in epidemic proportions. The knock-on effect of COVID has left a world of people being unsure, uncertain, anxious, worried. A lot of things just haven't settled. Our work and our life, where there may have been balance, has been shifted completely. And actually, even talking about the idea of work-life balance doesn't really work anymore. It's just balance. Let's just say we need balance. And when there is balance, there is flow. So fear can come in the form of, I'm not good enough. This isn't working for me. I want this to happen and it's not happening quick enough, and I don't like where I am right now. It can come in the form of self-sabotage. Well, I didn't really want it anyway. It can come in the form of perfectionism. Always trying to be good enough, always trying to get it right, always trying to be the best, always judging whether or not it is or isn't what it should be. It can come in the form of self-criticism. You know, that beating ourselves up kind of thing that goes on in our minds. And in fact, everything that we're going to be talking about here is actually about the mind. And it's not so much about mastering the mind, it's about putting the mind in its rightful place as a tool for our lives and not something to run our lives, which without wisdom is what happens. It is automatic, it is just what is going to happen unless there's an awareness that actually that is what's happening and we don't want it to happen anymore. So fear comes in those guises. And so what that means then in our organizations and in our lives is that we know that somewhere in there we're not at peak. We're not at peak performance. We find it hard to make decisions. We kind of feel a bit stuck. We kind of feel that we're in here and everything else is out there and it's me against the world. And that world can be confusing and that world can seem hostile and the world can seem separate to me. And that makes me feel very uncomfortable. And I can talk from the first person because that was me. That was me as an executive. That was me in the boardroom. Just not feeling quite right. A low level of anxiety. And there will be people around you, people in your organizations who are feeling like this right this second. You might be one of them. You might be listening to this and this might be you. And so I'm speaking to that. I'm speaking to you about that. Because what we tell organizations and in our lives is we throw another course on top of what's already, and it literally is like moving deck chairs around the Titanic. because moving that doesn't change the deep-seated beliefs that cause the fear, that manifest what comes up in the first place. We have to go back to what is actually causing that fear to arise. And so what do I mean by flow? Well, flow is often talked about in terms of the violinist, the Picasso, the expert that's in such raptures. They're doing it without realizing they're doing it, and they're just in the moment. And that is flow. And how does that relate to the everyday life? How does that relate to being in a meeting and talking and communicating? How does that relate to the new strategy? How does that relate to your business that you're setting up and running as an entrepreneur? How does that relate to how you relate to your family and the people? Because that's kind of up there and out there, isn't it? As a kind of unattainable, a thing that just isn't. Not really. And so what I mean by flow is that there is complete ease, there is complete alignment within and about you. There is authenticity about your actions, your words, and there is flow. The words are just flowing, the actions are flowing. There is no fear about, well, is it good enough? What will happen if I do? What will happen if I don't? There is just happening. There is just flow. It is expansive. It is freeing. It is comfortable. And when you are operating from that space, when your organizations are operating from that space, there is flow, there is peak performance, and it is effortless. And in many spaces, many lives, we are very, very far away from that. And so why does that matter? Because if your life, if your organizations, if everything is run from a mode of fear, everything is going to feel hard. It is going to feel clunky. It is going to feel misaligned, inauthentic. And yet we write our values down in our organizations. Integrity. Integrity without flow is trying to, well, you know, the old pushing around peg in a square hole. It'll come and it'll go, and there'll be a battle because it doesn't quite fit. Everything starts with the conditions for flow. And when you have that in your life, there is ease, there is joy. You're giving of your best to the people around you, whether it's your family, your little business that you've nurtured, your entire department, maybe your entire organization. People aren't arguing in the boardroom, they're flow. Ease. There's inspiration, there's creativity, there's wisdom. Those are the qualities that come out when we're in flow. Decisions just seem to happen. And analysis of those decisions as well. So that's the fear. The fear manifests in all kinds of ways. It could be a very low level, subtle feeling of, I don't feel right. I'm questioning myself. I'm doubting myself. And then I might doubt them over there and question them over there. Their motives, I may judge them. And sometimes I may put all the blame on them. That's still fear. So let's dive into that a little bit and look at what we can do. And so part of this is sharing to open your eyes, to plant the seed that there is a different way in your organization, in your life, and to give you some tools and things that you can think about to help you at least diagnose, am I there or am I not? Where am I on this scale of fear and flow? Because generally we will be somewhere in the middle of it and it's completely fluid. We may be in flow one minute and then shrink back into fear the next. We may be trying to make a significant change in our lives, and one minute we want it, and the next minute we don't. Conflict comes from that. When we're out there in that space of duality, it's black and it's white. It's yes and it's no. It's I want to stop, I don't want to stop. I want to start, I don't want to start. Conflict. And when there is conflict, there is no flow. There is unease as opposed to ease. Imagine what your life, imagine what your business, imagine what your departments, imagine what that would be like if there was just the realization and the understanding that operating from flow opens up opportunities for enormous expansion and potential. Just planting that seed, that the opportunity for that is huge. I spent much of my life in the executive boardroom. I was a management consultant for 20 years. I've worked overseas. I've worked in private sector, public sector. I'm a master's level coach. I'm a fellow of the Association for Coaching. I've done my time in the boardroom and executive world. I now coach executive women, entrepreneurs, bring workshops to departments who want to think differently. Founder of the Alcohol Coach. Some of you listening and watching may well be clients. And what I have seen again and again and again is that fear stops flow. So let's step back and just break that down a little bit so that we can understand where it comes from, why is it like that, and what it actually means to you. I lived in a low-level state of fear for many, many, many years. I would say actually for as long as I can remember. There would be doubt, there would be anxiety. I used to smoke, I used to drink too much. I kind of went there to escape the feelings, the stuckness, that fear. And we do that. We try to cope by layering stuff on. It's like sticking plasters in the wrong place. We're never going to actually heal what we need to heal by doing that. And when we fall into things like smoking or drinking or whatever that might be, perfectionism, we find that that becomes the focus and we're even further away from flow. So originally when you were born, there was just flow. You look at a baby's in flow. You look at a bird flying in the sky, the bird is in flow. The bird is not there looking at the next bird next to it thinking, I wonder if I'm good enough. I wonder if that bird over there is a better bird than I am. Cat, mouse, tree. It's uniquely human to do that. So when we're like that and then we feel discomfort and then we reach to things to try to grasp at, to make ourselves feel better, we're going further and further and further and further away from actually being where we want to be. Everything that we do as humans, because fundamentally we're animals in suits that go into boardrooms, that lead organizations, that work, that raise families. We're a highly advanced animal. And so often we don't do ourselves any favors, do we? We criticize ourselves, we judge ourselves. And yet, just look at yourself. Such an incredible being. Just incredible. All organisms are designed to protect themselves and survive. That is inherent. It is kind of obvious as well, isn't it? We're programmed to survive. Way back in the depths of time and in our development, part of our survival developed a sense of me, developed a sense of need to survive in our mind. If you touch a hot stove, you're going to automatically take your hand off it. You're not going to even think about it. If a line is running down the street at you, you're going to run or freeze. It is automatic. That response is going to be automatic. But our minds have developed their own little sense of self that tries to protect itself. And it really doesn't need to. And therein is the source of all the problems. Your mind, your brain, the incredible brain of a human being, is designed to, number one, narrate. It'll describe. We're very, very good at describing things. The brain, the mind, is designed to compare. This is the thinking mind. Obviously, things like beating of hearts and all of those things, breathing, happen without us thinking about it. It's designed to compare a safe berry to eat, a dangerous berry to eat, a good partner, a bad partner. It's designed to compare. And it's also designed to measure tall, short. That's all it does. That is all it does and everything it does. And it is a tool. It's a tool that helps us to analyze. It's a tool that helps us to work things out. It's an incredible tool that helps us to create and manifest and all of those things. But where it goes wrong is when it takes on a mind of its own to help itself survive. And it gets caught in a kind of a loop. And in that loop is where it judges itself. It starts to feel bad about itself. And none of that serves you. None of it at all. I'll tell you a quick story about how the survival mechanism really kicks in when you need it to. I was riding my motorbike through a cobbled square in the rain in Spain. I was behind my partner some way. I think we got lost. As I turned into the cobbled square, a little bit nervous of riding on the cobbles, at one point I looked up and I looked straight into the eyes of a man who was driving a bus. It was heading straight for me. Now, in that moment, I didn't start thinking, well, that was a daft thing of me to do. I'm obviously not a very good rider. I should have been concentrating more. Why is it raining? Why am I here? Why? What's wrong? None of that happened. What happened is that all of the ability to do that shut down, because that is automatic. That is the survival response kicking in. What happened was I heard myself screaming inside my helmet. And then what happened was I noticed I was still on my bike. I was 90 degrees shifted from where I was. And I was still moving. That is the survival mechanism. When it's needed, it is automatic. It just happens. And yet the mind takes on its own life form to try to protect us. And what it does is it limits us, it causes stuckness, and it stops our flow. When it rules us and we don't rule it. So mind mastery is the realization that the mind is a tool. And that when the mind is calmed and there is peace and it itself feels safe and secure, which you can work to achieve, then flow comes forwards. It is all about survival. So the mini me is that part of mind. The first thing that you can do is to recognize when the mini me is not serving you and just notice it. Just notice it. And you can ask yourself this question, and I invite you to ask yourself this question now. What is here now when there is no problem to solve? What is here right now when there is no problem to solve? And you might have noticed that there was a slight pause where the mind goes, I don't know. Because that question, it silences the mind. It just stops the narration just for a moment to give you some space. And in that space is the power of everything. So when we're not in flow and when there is fear, this is what we do. I'm going to use a pen as an analogy. So let's say that this is the problem. Now, as you may or may not know, I'm also founder of the Alcohol Coach. And so drinking can become a problem. It can become a problem. It's a highly addictive substance. It's estimated that 15 to 20% of the population in the UK and the US and Australia, Canada, New Zealand have an issue with alcohol. That is a huge amount of people trying to cope. So let's say that there is a problem. It could be that I just don't feel I'm good enough. Whatever that problem might be, the thing that's causing the stuckness. Now, if you sit where you're sitting and you just look out and you look at this pen and you look at everything around you, you'll notice that this pen is actually quite a small element. You can see me on a screen, maybe the mobile, maybe your laptop. You'll see the pen, and it's quite small in terms of everything around you. And so the invitation now is for you to pick up your own pen. This is a very short exercise. And just to look at it and focus your attention on it. And as you focus your attention on it, tighten it. Tighten your grip. And now take the other hand and grip round that. And give it your attention. And now pull it in as tight as you can. Imagine that you're in a tight ball and this is it. I'm focusing. I want this problem gone. I want this problem gone. I want to solve this problem. I'm feeling anxious. I'm not feeling good today. Whatever the narrative is for you. And this is what it's like when we feel fear and it blocks flow because all of the attention is on this. It is on the problem and there is no space to be able to solve the problem. All of the emotion is focused on the problem. And the paradox is that when we actually let go of the problem, we give ourselves the space to solve the problem. How much smaller is it now? Has it changed? No, we are looking at the whole of it in a big, wide, expansive space. And so if there is something in your life that you're looking to solve or change, what you don't want to be doing is gripping onto the problem. And the paradox is that when we actually step back and just allow the problem to be there, because it's already there anyway, all of these resources come up to help us actually solve the problem. I often say to my students, imagine planting a seed in the ground, and that is the thing that you want to have happen. In your organization, for your business, for your family, for you. This is what you really want to have happen. And you plant that seed in the ground. Maybe it's freedom from the fear, freedom from whatever it is. I'm a big fan of freedom. Pop your seed in the ground. Now, what is inside a seed that's going to enable it to do what a seed does? What is there in it? You can look at a seed, it's a tiny little thing, and yet an acorn has the potential to become an oak. It does it by itself, given the right resources. It will never grow into an oak tree if it's dug up all the time. If it's gripped onto and never gets a chance to be planted. And yet that's what we try to do. And we wonder why we don't get anywhere. We wonder why we're still stuck with the problem very firmly in our hands. So if there is something for you, you plant the seed, water, sunlight, space, and just see what happens. Because I guarantee that what's happening right now across our organizations and in our businesses and in our homes, is everybody's clinging on to this. And when we want something to be different because we don't like the way it is now, whether that's getting home from work at the end of the day and wanting to relax because we're feeling stressed, when we want something to be different from how it fundamentally is now, what we're actually doing is closing down on that. We're closing down on that problem. And we're giving it all of our focus and attention. Whereas the way to feel better is to just step back from it all and to let it all just settle. Take a deep breath. Because the peace is found when in flow. It's not found when we're in that restrictive loop of grasping. Don't we do that? Don't you find that you do that? When I get that, everything will be okay. When I just get another zero added onto my bank balance, I'll be okay. When that person sorted themselves out, I'll be okay. When that's changed, this has changed, I'll be okay. But all of that is just layering stuff on. And so you, your family, your teams, those around you, there is nothing inherently wrong with anybody. We try to fix things. We're great fixers. We try to fix up ourselves. We try to fix others. If I just change this, if I just change that, it'll all be okay. And then I'll start that thing. And then that day kind of doesn't really come. Or it does, and then there's still something to fix. And we may get round to it. And we still feel stuck. There is nothing wrong with you. And the analogy I use when working with my clients is for you to imagine that there is the sun in the sky, a blue, blue sky, and a brightly lit, sunny landscape. And that a combination of all those things is who you are. That is you, that is innate. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong. And then we get conditioned by life. Things happen. We have our narratives, we have our traumas, we have our things. Everybody has something. Many people have a lot of things. And we build our stories and our beliefs and our layers around that. And those layers, in this analogy, become the clouds in the sky. And if we're caught in a loop of overworking, overthinking, overdrinking, over whatevering, those clouds can seem really, really quite dense and quite heavy. And we kind of wake up one day and we think, I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't know what I want. I don't know where I'm going. Nothing seems quite right. And we look down at the landscape and it's gloomy. It's just darker. And what we do is we start going down to the landscape and trying to scrub all the darkness out. We try to rub it out. We're trying to solve the problem in the wrong place. Sometimes the weather is just the weather, but we cling on to it, don't we? You cling on to it trying to change it. things arise. Fundamentally, when we look into the beliefs and the narratives and all the things that cause that deep-seated fear that we all have, every single one of us has it, we begin to remove the layers. And that's why, if you've ever found a freedom in life, maybe you used to smoke, maybe you used to overwork, and then you woke up one day because something had happened and you think, I'm not doing that anymore. Maybe it was over drinking, whatever it was for you. You feel lighter. Everything seems a bit brighter somehow. And that is because those layers have gone. The beliefs and the conditioning which caused that darkness in the first place. And so rather than going out and trying to be something else, get something else to make yourself feel better, it's the recognition that flow is natural. What we need to be looking at is what we need to remove to enable that alignment, that authenticity, and that wisdom. So that the change that you want, the feelings that you want to have, happen. Like the acorn growing into the oak. You look at it one day and you go, wow, it's that big. A bit later on, it's that big. It's doing it all by itself. It's like magic. It's like a miracle. It's doing it by itself. And we say things like, we've got to get out of our own way. What does that actually mean? You can't actually get out of your own way. What is meant by that is removing those clouds, those layers. And when we look at life in that way, that there's nothing wrong with me, what is it that's in the way? We start to chip away at that, and things start to brighten, and things start to change without us noticing. Have you ever had a time in your life where you kind of notice one day that something that used to bug you or used to be there hasn't been around for a while? You don't notice it when it's gone, but you just think, wow, I haven't thought about that for ages, and that used to bug me all the time. The reason for that is because a layer's gone and there's more flow that can then come forwards. And so here's a diagnostic I would like to leave you with. If anybody has any questions, then please ask away. I'd like to leave you with a diagnostic that you can use. And if you're in an organization, then maybe you can throw this out to your management team and see where this lands. At any point, we're either operating from a place of limitation or expansion. We're either operating from feeling slightly restricted, feeling slightly unsure, feeling not quite rightness, or we're operating from a place where we're creative. There's wisdom just coming up. We just seem to know. We're feeling expansive. We're feeling like everything's okay. And so one is the fear-driven and one is the flow-driven. And so I think we've come full circle. For flow to be there in your life, in the lives of those around you, it's a recognition that if it isn't there, then the mind has got control. The mind is kind of running rampant, and we need to step back from that and look at what's beneath it. What is the narrative that I'm telling myself that isn't serving me? I'll just finish with a beautiful analogy called the 3 arrows. When anything happens in our life, it could be an upset, something that just doesn't go right for us that day, or it could be a person at work said something, done something, whatever. And doesn't feel good. There is an upset. It's like an arrow's penetrated our hearts somewhere. That's 5% of the upset. Because what we then do is we pick up a second arrow that has 90% written on it, and we stab that into ourselves. Even if there isn't any feeling of blame or judgment here, it's all out there at the other. We're giving our energy, we're giving our attention, we're giving our time, we're giving our narrative stories, adding to adding, layers upon layers upon layers. And it comes very, very far removed from the initial thing that was interpreted. And before we know it, we're completely wrapped up in this. And then the final 5% is where we actually beat ourselves up for having picked up that second arrow and started it all off in the first place. And so the invitation here is to bring awareness to when these things are happening, because in that lies your power. And when you have power, you have flow. Thank you very much, everybody. I'll speak to you again. Any questions? Just one. I feel something is missing, but I feel guilty because I have a great life. We all have our narratives. We all have our conditioning. And the mini me is constantly looking for ways to feel better. And so what we often do in life is we add, we seek, we get more and more and more stuff. And for as long as we're out gathering all of this stuff, it's like we have another goal. We have something else to go out and get and grab, and then it'll all feel better. But when we get to a point often where we feel we have it all and there's still something that doesn't feel right, well, first of all, we can feel guilty because we feel we should be okay about everything. And secondly, the clouds in the sky that I was talking about that may darken the landscape are really nothing to do with anything you get or have. It comes from a very deep sense of well-being and okayness. And so the first thing to say is it's okay to feel like that. It's very natural. It's very human. There's nothing wrong with you. And often it's in the grabbing of those things to try to make ourselves feel better that we actually make ourselves feel worse. So what I would suggest is the first thing is just to give yourself some self-compassion, that this is how you feel right now and that that's okay. And within that, to think about the pen and the gripping on and just to give yourself some space around it. Give the problem some space and see how that goes for you. Okay. Thank you so much.